Good hello, it is the 10th episode of Read Between the Frames. It's time for something a bit special. How about something that I was personally involved in? With a fitting title as well. This is Doctor Who, the 10th Planet. Doctor Who's been running for well over 50 years now, and back in the 60s, television was quite disposable. It was like radio, broadcast once and, well, that was it. They never expected anyone to see it again, and certainly no one really thought that this show would still be getting talked about so many years later. So sadly, many of the episodes are just simply gone. Destroyed, disintegrated, or burnt. Now only remnants remain of these old black and white stories. Things like photos of the sets and actors, some scripts here and there, and thanks to eager fans, recordings of the audio. With all these bits and pieces, somewhat of a jigsaw puzzle presented itself, and animators were hired to figure out what these episodes would have been like and bring them back to life. This was the first one I was involved in, the 10th Planet. A very exciting episode to be a part of, actually, being both the first ever Cyberman story and the first ever Regeneration story, both becoming staples of the series which carry on to this day. The 10th Planet itself consisted of 4 20-minute episodes. The first 3 survive. The finale, episode 4, arguably the most important one, is also the only one missing. There were only 5 animators full-time on this project, and we had not very long to do it in. Quite the challenge indeed. There was an influence, however, to the look and style. The one who helped kick it off, also the first animator on board, was none other than Otter King, Paul Johnson. Also best known for this little video, you might have even seen it. These episodes, they are a reconstruction. They use the original audio, completely untouched, and we must replicate the look of a 1960s live-action show as closely as possible. One of the most difficult elements was replicating so many actors and staying true to their likeness. One of the other big challenges was figuring out just how should things like this move. Now consider, there's only 5 of us full-time, and the budget was, well, peanuts really. So what is the most sensible way to make these things move but still honor the source material? Now other studios have made Doctor Who reconstructions as well, and they probably went with a more sensible option of more of a rig-based or tween-based thing. We decided to go with a bit of a different approach. Frame-by-frame animation with 4 or 5 tone shading. What were we thinking? There was quite an emphasis on rotoscoping too. Rotoscoping is a controversial method for creating animation. It often involves just filming each other on our phone and then tracing over it. Films which have attempted this in the past end up looking a bit wobbly, and it can be a bit jarring or even uncanny valley at times. But when we're trying to replicate a live action thing as closely as we can, it seemed to fall within a happy middle ground. However, many years have passed since then. I'm not sure how this has aged, and being a brand like Doctor Who, the fan base does fall divided on such opinions. So, spoiler warning for the end of the 2017 season. But these classic incarnations of the Cybermen, as well as the first incarnation of the Doctor himself, have recently returned to the show. This makes 10th Planet not only relevant to talk about again, but the current plot of the new series is directly interwoven with it. At the end of the recent season, the 12th Doctor is dying and about to change yet again. He steps out of the TARDIS into the snow, refusing to change. But suddenly before him, also muttering about not wanting to change, appears none other than the first Doctor. We can pinpoint where this moment takes place, thanks to the animated 10th Planet. Near the end of that story, the first Doctor is quite ill and weak. He leaves the cyber ship, leaving companions Ben and Polly behind. Eventually, the scene ends by fading to black, and when it fades back in and we see them next, they're banging on the TARDIS doors with the Doctor already inside. So we can pretty much confirm now that this encounter and this upcoming Christmas special takes place during this exact moment. I think that's pretty exciting. Despite the influences of Paul's style, his main role on the project was actually in the backgrounds. And when you see some of these establishing shots, far out he's good. Comparing to the original set images, they're almost photorealistic, with the purpose of using them as a set, like in the original show. So when you do zoom in, you can start to see that they indeed do have outlines and a sketchy, painterly feel to them that starts to blend better with the drawn characters. With the style consisting of anything up to 4 or 5 tone shading, you have to be careful when to choose your battles, how much movement is involved. Images like the rear of this Cyberman here was probably one of my favorite pieces, just because it's a still. I could really go to town on making it shiny and with lots of nice bits of black. This is a lesson I learned quickly after shading this animation and trying to give it a lot of detail like the shine in the headlamp and lots of tones around the mask as it collapses. It took a really long time. But when things are moving quickly, the audience doesn't tend to notice as much, so you can be efficient and keep things looking nice. So the next one was shading this piece here. It still has detail, but look at the amount of shading in the face. There's considerably less. This took, oh man, it was so fast. Although, of course, looking back now, there is a certain level of crudeness, like tiny little gaps in the shading and whatever. Yeah, whoops. See, I rag on the animation mistakes of so many other productions. I don't think I'm exempt from it either. Now, of course, it wouldn't be an animated production without some kind of Easter egg being snuck in there. The story behind this one is pretty amusing. This radiation Geiger counter was a late addition, and one of the animators thought, oh, I know, I'll put my name on it backwards. But then later on, we realized the shot needed to be flipped. So there it is, clear as day, right in the middle of the screen. You know, for being a show about time travel, this is probably the closest to it you can actually get, by injecting something into a 50-year-old program. People often ask that if I was given the opportunity to do another animated Doctor Who, which would I choose? And start rattling off many of their favorites. Of course, however, it so often comes down to the money. Productions like this need to be financially and time efficient to create. So we are very lucky getting to do a Cyberman story because, well, they all look the same. So you can start to recycle parts. Considering when they speak, they just open their mouths and close them again. So yeah, lip syncing's pretty straightforward. But the plot thickens and it goes even deeper. Being a sci-fi program, or at least the episodes that are set in the future, a lot more of the time the characters will be in uniform. So even more pieces can be recycled. Take this scene, for instance. This saved our bacon. We were running out of time. Things were becoming, unfortunately, more and more rushed. We needed a solution. Then realized that there was this scene, which is a large portion of the episode, and everyone's wearing radiation suits with these visors over their faces. So along came the idea, what if we were to just animate, solid 10 seconds of miscellaneous hand gestures, and just kinda used it for everyone? Would that work? Could we get away? No, we wouldn't get away with that. People would be outraged. How much time do we have? Okay, I think we should just try it. And after mixing it in with correct establishing shots, zoom in so you can still see their faces behind the visors, I think it worked. The story still flows. You can always tell where any given character is at any time, even if you can't see them, and it never gets confusing. So I think we might have pulled it off. Now, I must give credit especially to the ending scene. This was animated almost completely by Chris, one of the animators on the team. He focused almost all of his attention on this ending scene. I think what a wonderful job he did. The detail is exquisite. There's so much expression in each of the characters. This scene has a lot of weight for not just this episode, but the franchise as a whole. Consider, the main character has never regenerated before. Replacing the main actor is a big deal. If it didn't work, it never would have continued. So saying goodbye to this character is quite an emotional moment among the fan base. So I think it's wonderful that he put in enough care for subtle things like his monocle swinging back and forth, or even Polly's hair having movement when she moved around. But boy, oh boy, did it take a lot of detective work to figure out what was going on. Now remember, we are not allowed to tinker with the audio. And there were massively large chunks of silence. Anything from 30 to 60 seconds of silence. And we're just listening to it thinking, what is happening? What are they doing? We've got our ears right up to the headphones, listening super closely for any sounds in the back of the set. And it's like, oh, are those footsteps? Is someone walking? Or is that a whisper? Because it is a bit of a heartfelt moment at the end of, the main character's life. Everyone's speaking quite softly. He hasn't got a whole lot of energy left. It took quite a long time to balance the pacing so that it felt natural, it didn't get boring, and managed to carry the weight of responsibility that this scene has, which starts to, of course, bridge into something that, believe it or not, is relevant to the series in 2017. So we can only assume now that after the upcoming Christmas special has concluded, we will return here. We know that we're going to be seeing the inside of the First Doctor's TARDIS, and here it is as it originally was. A lot of the First Doctor's regeneration does survive, so we're fortunate enough here to be able to copy it as exactly as possible. We need to honor the source material. This is not a place for mucking around and just doing whatever you want. Movements like this one are quite delicate, and oh man, there's a lot of detail involved with frame by frame drawing checkered pants like that. Oh man, I think Chris would have had a hard time trying to keep that smooth. And finally, the episode ends with the first regeneration itself. The original version, as you can see here, was more of a crossfade. So we're able to make just one simple adjustment of putting in a facial morph as it moves from William Hartnell into Patrick Troughton. Interestingly enough, the episode that followed this one, The Power of the Daleks, was also lost, and it recently was reanimated as well. And unlike just being a single episode like this, it was a 6-parter, all of it being reanimated. It was done by a different studio though, I had no idea it was even coming out. And it's always a treat to see how different people will approach the same kind of project. Will more ever get done? I really don't know. But speaking as someone who was a Doctor Who fan since being a young child, I'd like to hope so. And would I want to do it again with everything that I've learnt? Well, I said that earlier. But I often think, what would really be the best way to approach a reconstruction of a lost 1960s TV show? Consider with the upcoming episode, they've recast the first Doctor and it works. Everyone loves him. Would it perhaps be cheaper to not reanimate it and just reshoot the whole thing? Would you attempt to ad-lib it with the original audio? Or just do it all from scratch? We've seen that done in the Adventures in Space and Time special. And again, I think it works. I think people would like that. But I'd like to throw another suggestion into the pile as well. And at first, it will sound controversial, but bear with me. A reimagining. Because I'll tell you this. The way things look now are not the way you remember them. Have you ever watched a show from childhood have you ever watched a show or played a game from childhood now that you're an adult and something just seemed a bit off? Or maybe you didn't see it, you're probably only completely blinded by the nostalgia. But if you try and show it to a friend, they simply can't see it. They just see dodgy grading or wobbly sets or bad graphics. So in order to recapture the imagination and the wonder and the excitement, so that someone who was able to grow up with these original stories could re-experience it with the same emotion that they did, and also at the same time, a child now will be able to watch it for the first time and also experience that same sense of wonder. What would the episode need to look like then? To which I would propose a reimagining in color, brighter and bolder and more exciting. I mean, it's being drawn now. It's not limited by grayscale and the size of the sets and the size of the world. It is simply important that you keep it true. It's still the audio and dialogue is still the original. The pacing is kept the same. It absolutely must still be the same story, but it is possible to just make it shinier. When I explain it like this, Doctor Who fans do tend to be a little bit more on board with it. But it's still, of course, a personal opinion and something that I'm very, very fascinated to find out how anybody else feels about it. So please, I encourage you to get involved in the comments. I'd be thrilled to hear your thoughts. And if you're new to Onion Skin, please do consider subscribing. There is so much more to explore, unpack, and discuss when we slow animation down and read between the frames. Okay. But it goes even deeper. Polly's back. Look, it's Polly. But I think we can figure out when this bit is from as well.
What happened to you, Doctor?
Oh, I'm not sure, my dear. Comes from an outside influence.
This whole body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
What do you mean wearing a bit thin?
Oh, don't worry, child, don't worry.
So we'll find out if this is a good guess or not. But I am almost certain that that line is going to happen right here. Polly says, "What's happening to you, Doctor?" Pan down to glowy hands. And the first Doctor says, "My body's wearing a bit thin." But it gets even more interesting still.
What happened to you, Doctor?
Oh, I'm not sure, my dear. Can't some an outside influence. This whole body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
What do you mean wearing a bit thin?
Oh, don't worry, child, don't worry.
So there's our version of it, and you can see we made a bit of a mistake because Ben's in the shot. Ben was not meant to be there at all. The sneaky boy. But we did get the background right. See that ladder in the background there? The recovered version of that clip, the ladder is indeed there. However, if I'm right in guessing that this scene is a version of that moment, there, look, there's stairs there. Looking at the set photo, there's the stairs there. They're on the other side of the room. So have they actually placed the characters in the wrong spot in the room entirely? Guess we'll have to wait and see. But that's all just fan speculation. We need to be spending some time reading between frames. Right?
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear. Have you no emotions, sir? Pride, hate, fear.
Have you no emotions, sir?
That transition was amazing. How the heck did they keep it so flipping smooth? Especially the transition to the background. Check that out. It is completely seamless. How do they do that? I guess they must have just taken the original background, colorized it, and shot David Bradley in front of a green screen. Let's compare it to the original. Oh, look at that. The background is accurate, but it's far too blurry, and the machine in the background doesn't have any blinking lights at all. So it's not the same. And again, going from that last clip, it means they have completely rebuilt the tracking room. As someone who worked on this is awesome. I can't wait to see it again. But no, actually, it gets even weirder still. Enhance, computer, I say enhance. For each movement he makes, his head sort of like twitches upwards. See? Up. The head's looking up, all that sort of happens. Now, let's go back and watch the other black and white version again. Something is amiss. So this should look exactly the same. The head didn't move upwards. In fact, it twisted sideways there. Did you see that? This isn't the original footage at all. It's David Bradley acting the entire scene. They've used a CG head. Is this exactly the same as what they did to Peter Cushing in Rogue One? But no. Hang on. Let's read between the frames even more closely. Looking at each of these movements of Hartnell's face, particularly around his mouth, look at the shapes his mouth makes as they go. So that's quite an interesting shaped mouth, right? Okay, so let's see if we can find it in this version, because this lighting here is far too perfect. They haven't just mirrored it. It is exactly the same. So much the same that I don't think this can be a 3D model or a 3D animation at all. Yes, there it is. That's the same crook mouth, but it's a little bit different. So it seems as though they have taken frame by frame the animation of his face and applied it to the acting and the head of the new actor, Snapchat style. Look particularly as he says the word hate. Hate. The whole body moves up, it has a twitch, his head tilts as well. Hate. So as they go to track that same facial movement to a new face, which doesn't go up, but rather goes to the side. This is probably where the model falls off a little bit, if and only if we watch it frame by frame. Do you see that rotation? So the original head is moving up, this one is now moving to the side. So how does it track it? There is an extreme motion blur on that teeth and lower mouth because it's moving up with the rest of the head. But this time it doesn't work that way. So look at the right eye, you can see it doesn't really have perspective as it rotates. It is doing that face tracking Snapchat thing. The suit and the hair is completely the new actor. Only the face is the original. This was never the original scene at all. It was just completely fabricated. That's so freaking clever. It works brilliantly. Huge compliments to whoever put this together. Because unlike things like the Peter Cushing model and other CG recreations of previous actors, it doesn't seem like anybody has picked up on this. They just assumed it was literally the previous clip transferred into this one. That's awesome.